Well, hello, everybody. It is lovely to see you. I am Matthew Taylor, and it is Wednesday, 2 o'clock, Mountain Time, which means really one thing, which is make stories matter. And I am thrilled to see you guys, and we're going to dive into our second part about this link, the indisputable link between storytelling and leadership. And so we'll do a little quick recap of what we did in that first one and then dive into this second part. And so if you remember last week, the pieces we talked about, well, one of the first ones was that the study by Gallup, this idea of what it is that people look for in order to follow somebody. And if you remember, maybe you did that work with your mentor and think about your mentor and what were the qualities they showed you. So Gallup came up with those 4 buckets, if you remember, the buckets of which all the responses they had kind of fell within these 4 buckets. And the first was trust. The second was compassion. The third was stability. And the fourth was hope. And I was like, wow, awesome. If that's what people are looking in order to follow somebody, and if you're thinking of a leader really isn't a leader unless they have followers. And so that is what we want to inspire in the people who are listening to us as we speak. Then the other little bit we talked about was this idea of you cannot tell somebody to trust you. That is not very successful. Or explain to somebody how compassionate you are as a person. But we all have those stories that illustrate us in a trustworthy moment or in a compassionate moment, or can frame stories that give people hope. And then the stability side is, the punctuality or the credibility, how you speak, how you sound. And so we have those stories. So we need to remember them and find them and be able to drop them into conversations as we're chatting with people, just so we do what Grover, that quote that we mentioned, makes us do, which is reveal yourself or others will reveal you. And I know I do that all the time. If I don't get information about the person, then I fill in the rest of the details. And how accurate am I? Not very accurate at all most of the time. So that's just kind of the way. So that idea and the tip for that last week was to be thinking about some of those stories that you might be able to kind of just weave in. Bearing in mind, and we talked in previous Facebook Lives about thinking of stories as little tiny moments. It's not this whole once upon a time and a long, let me tell you a story kind of a thing. We're just using them kind of for work-wise or to help people get things that they want and to help others. So that was kind of a little recap on what we kind of discussed the last time. And we're going to delve, kind of move on from there and look at these other elements that kind of tie into why I think that story is so critical for a leader. And if you look at all the past leaders over time, not all, but most of the big ones we know, the one thing they have in common is that they're amazing orators. So that is that's a little plan here. What I would like to do is to start out with is a quote that I know I've mentioned in the previous one, which I love, which is from Peter Guber in his book Tell to Win, which is just over here. There you go. And when I saw it in the book, I was like, that is it. Because I wanted to try and simplify story to a degree so people could understand, because it's used in so many different ways. But if we want to use it, and I deal mainly with personal narratives, but it's like, how can we use story in kind of a business setting or even in personal settings? But this area of being able to kind of reveal who you are so you can create authentic relationships really quickly. And this was the quote that I thought. So let's bear this in mind as we go through today's Facebook Live. What he said was, a story is a vehicle that allows you to put the facts in an emotional context. And I loved it because it was just so simple. And first of all, it mentions facts. It's like, what are the facts? Another way of thinking for that on story would be the anecdote. What actually happened? This happened, this happened, this happened. But then it tells us what to do. Establish what are the most important facts you want to get across, and then place them in an emotional context. And there you have it. It also gave me this idea of stories as being really small little moments. And of course, they can be long, other ones, depending on your venue, but how we use things in work usually, and even in just social settings, it's usually snippets, little tiny moments. So keep that one in mind as we potter through this. The other part was we chatted about those different pieces, but then I went back as I was doing my research, a long way back actually, like over 2,300 years back, and so went back to Greece, a bit close to my homeland. I had many a summer vacation on the Greek islands. I say many, but at least 3 or 4 from what I can remember, back in some very heady and wild and crazy young days. But back in Greece, over 2,300 years ago, I have no idea what was going on, but something was, because there was just this melting of the minds. I mean, it was incredible with Aristotle and Plato and Socrates and many of the ideas and principles that they came up with, especially Aristotle, are still foundational in many of the sciences and in language and in different areas currently. And so I was like, wow, that must have been a crazy time to exist. And I was thinking that, as these guys were going around, they must have had that part where, just like anybody, they wanted people to adopt their ideas. Otherwise, they would just be gone. Like the other ones, there must have been other brilliant scholars who had ideas and thoughts and were putting them out there, but they weren't adopted, or they didn't create followers that would then carry and move their ideas, their messages, their thoughts forward. And Aristotle, being Aristotle, this is a little bit of me thinking that Aristotle might have done this, but must have gone at some point, oh, you know what? I can carry on and blather on about all these different ideas I have and thoughts, but unless anybody adopts them or follows me, then I'm kind of wasting my time. So he studied what it is that can influence a human. It's like, what is it that can persuade a human being? And he came up with Aristotle's 3 artistic proofs. And I was looking at them and I was like, you know what I'll do? I'll just ride on Aristotle's shoulders and I will think of the 4th artistic proof. And then the people will say, well, it's Aristotle's 3 artistic. And then, of course, you need to remember Matthew Taylor's 4th one. And I spent way too much time trying to think of what it was. And eventually I just had to go, you know what? I think he nailed it all that time ago. And how different the world was then and how different it is now, except we're human. And we are exactly the same. Our brains work the same. We are influenced, obviously, by our surroundings and experiences. But functionality-wise, we are just the same. And he got it. So this is what his 3 artistic proofs were. The first one that he came up with was the logos. And the translation in Greek, or Greek for that, is logic. And it's like, absolutely, if you've got a good logical argument, then that can persuade anybody. If this is this, if this has this, well then obviously this equals it. It's logic. It's there. And I often think of that as kind of the factual elements. It's like if you have great facts that you can offer, say you're selling a truck to somebody, and your truck happens to be cheaper, better looking, have a better payload, and has a fancy stereo, and the other truck doesn't, tell people, and they will be logically persuaded in the sense that will be it. And that is how I see most people trying to persuade other people. It's usually the facts, the logic, so that and that's all they'll kind of do. And as I said, it only really works successfully if your facts are infinitely better than the other person's. But he did come up with 2 other ideas. The next one he said was the pathos. And the pathos is the emotional appeal to the audience. And the translation for that is experience or suffering. And so the emotional appeal, he was saying, is as important, if not more important. And quite often we are swayed by emotion. And then we find that we will then make the decision and then justify the decision afterwards with logic. And so we basically will we're swayed by the emotion and we make it. and then we have to make sure that that was right and we were correct, and because we want to be right and all the rest, and we'll logically frame everything we need to make it feel like that is correct. And I know I've done that on many occasions. So that was the other one, the emotional appeal. But then he came up with a third one, and the third one was the ethos. And the ethos, the translation for that is character. And so it is the character of the person delivering the information. And it's like the character, the credibility, is are they trustworthy? Who is this person? And his research was really done in writing, and so at that point it would be more how it was written, and whether it was grammatically correct, or how it was set out, whether it told the story through the writing. But it's also exactly the same if you are telling an oral story or a moment. It's how do you sound? How do you look? Is there eye contact? What's your voice doing? Is there intonation? Are there ups? Are there downs? Is there flow? And the credibility of the knowledge of the topic. All of these pieces go in. And remember, we are very clever creatures, and we are working all this out as we go along. I mean, incredibly quickly. Of course, they're saying with the brain, the lower end of the estimates are the brain is processing from its senses over 11 million bits of information per second. So those were these three pieces that he said are ways to be able to persuade human beings. And as I was doing that and looking at it and kind of reading, all the information about Aristotle and what he did and how he came up with these ideas, it then dawned on me what we talked about right at the beginning of this Facebook Live, and that was the quote from Peter Guber. A story is a vehicle that allows you to put the facts in an emotional context. And I was like, well, there it is. The facts are what you want to get across. What is the absolutely essential that your audience must understand and remember in order for them to be able to think and do differently afterwards. And all you have to do is make sure you identify them. And then when you know what are the most important facts, then you wrap them in an emotional context. Just make sure that you have a little story that illustrates your facts. And as soon as you have that, then you deliver it. Now, if you're delivering it in front of 1,000 people or one person, it doesn't really matter. But that's where the ethos will come in, because it's your credibility, your ability to be able to communicate, your ability to be able to connect with the audience, build that a relationship quickly, and away you go. So a beautifully purposeful story has all three of Aristotle's artistic proofs running simultaneously. And then we ask ourselves, wow, was it a shock? Was it kind of hit and miss that these amazing leaders, the Abraham Lincolns and the Churchills and you mention them, Steve Jobs or Oprah Winfrey, it's like, the religious realm that we go to, that they were all amazing storytellers. And it was like, nah, not so much. It makes total sense. And the way to be able to connect with those people, with those pieces we talked about last week, with this idea of being able to reveal who you are as a person, because of course that is supporting your ethos. And that is going to be showing the credibility that you have and the relationship that you can build quickly. So I had business cards printed up by a friend of me a while ago, a long while ago actually, many years ago, and I was always a little embarrassed handing them out. And the reason was, or is still, is that my face is just way too big to be on a business card. And what I found myself doing was I started to hand my business card out upside down. And this is what I would do. I would kind of go, oh, yeah, sure, here's my business card, you can have it. And then I would say to them, by the way, my sole goal when I printed these was that my face would appear larger than any realtor's. And I'd been an estate agent in England, a realtor, and had a real estate license here as well, and knew how we were like always, oh, put your face on your card and everything. And then, and that I would say that simply, and then I'd hand them the card, and they would turn the card over and go and just be like, oh my gosh, your face is huge on it. And we would laugh, and they would pop it away, and that would be it. Until I started receiving calls, and people would call me, or they would text me, or email, and especially when they called, I would have that amazing time. You might have had it where somebody's talking to you, and they know you, but you have no idea who they are. And so you start asking very broad questions to try and work out who they like. Oh, you're still doing, what you were doing when we last chatted, and things like this. And you're just kind of grasping at straws. And at some point you'll go, oh yeah, I get it. Oh right, and now I remember. Maybe that's as you get older that happens more and more. But I was having this quite often with people, and then eventually I would realize I don't know this person. This is somebody who has contacted me literally from a networking event, and I've given a card to. And then I realized, and I'm sad to say this was about 4 years after I've had these cards and this was happening, I realized that's exactly what we were talking about. My business card I placed, which was my business, my name, my company, the telephone number, what I did, I placed it in an emotional context by just really because I was so embarrassed about how big my face was. And I handed it out. And it stuck with the person because that was that little moment of a story that basically put the facts that were important for me to get across to this person in the emotional context. And then I delivered it, and we laughed and had fun. And then they called me out of the blue, and I had business. So that, I hope, can kind of help you see how when I say little tiny moments, it can be little tiny moments. Now, the sad part is that I am still with this business card because I can't change the damn thing because it works. And I also use it now quite a bit to kind of explain and show or illustrate or tell a story about exactly the stuff we're talking about. We like to kind of give you a little tip each week on things. It's to kind of aid your storytelling and being able to incorporate that into your life. And so the biggest part for me for this one is with the fact that it is that emotional context, and that is the one thing that is usually missing. So what I would say is anytime you think about a little piece that you're preparing or you've got your facts, it's like, have you popped it in an emotional context? And so it can be as simple as using names, which make things become, if I say my mum's, in England, who's long since passed away now, but that's very different from if I say my mother, Sylvia Taylor, who lived in East Wittering, West Sussex in England. And you can even tell by me just saying it, not only does the person suddenly, that person becomes a person, not just an object of a mother, but this is now of somebody. It's Sylvia Taylor. But my voice changes, my eyes change, my face changes when I say it. And that's just, so names really anchor people. And that can be enough emotion sometimes. So we're not talking about you having to bare your soul to somebody. But adding these little bits, other ways we'll be able to do it is sharing how you felt at a time. Not going, oh, it made me happy. But it's like, what happened? What was the sensation like? Or often a location or a person, a description will help add emotion in it. So any of these little pieces, just check that you actually do incorporate something and see how that goes. And then the next thing is do it. I mean, you can practice this, even if you're thinking about incorporating this for something that you're doing work-wise, or you have a non-profit and you're trying to spread the word and get people, or you're selling an album, or you're doing whatever it is. But you can practice it everywhere, anywhere. Not as much now because we're not going out and seeing gazillions of people around all the time, or at least I guess we are starting to now, which is great. But you can always kind of test it out to get comfortable and see how it works and pay attention. So I'm Matthew Taylor. This has been Make Stories Matter, and Persuasion Through Narrative is my company. And you can get hold of me at matthew@matthewtaylor.com. Or you can go to our Facebook group, which is Powerfully Fun Storytelling. I also have a YouTube channel, which I'd love for you to subscribe to, which is Matthew Taylor Stories. And so there are a myriad of ways to, that was a few of them anyway. But I would love to hear from you. Please post comments or reach out any which way you want to. Thanks so much. This has been another Facebook Live Make Stories Matter. Cheers.